The 22 long rifle for bugging out. Well, among other purposes anyway. In a, SHTF situation, do you go after the 22 long rifle as your go-to bug out rifle? We're going to talk about that. Hang on just a couple minutes and get through my agonizingly long intro. So recently I posed a question on the internet about the 22 long rifle and its feasibility and popularity as a go-to round for the bug out, for the, world's end, the end of the world as we know it, all these different things. And I was actually a little surprised to see how popular the idea was. So let's do this. Let's talk about the 22 long rifle in that scenario. Now this comes with a couple of caveats. The first of which being that we are talking about as a primary weapon for a capable adult. That is, if you are an individual adult and you have to grab what you're going to grab for the bug out, is the 22 long rifle going to be your primary weapon for all the purposes that would come up in this kind of scenario. We're not talking about, handing one to a kid, something like this Ruger back here, the 1022 breakdown or takedown, with, a host of ammo for that a kid who's going with you can carry. That's not what we're talking about here. I can't find any downsides to doing that. It seems like a reasonable idea. But we're talking about an individual, adult, who's capable of carrying some weight, who is capable of traveling long distances, and who's capable of handling a higher caliber weapon. So is it a good idea for an adult in that scenario to choose the 22 long rifle as his primary rifle? The other caveat here is we're not talking about a situation where we are going off to fight a war. Because obviously if the purpose of bugging out was to engage in conflict, you're not going to want to carry a 22. I mean, that seems pretty obvious to me. I mean, you don't want to get into conflict with a 22, do you? So those are the two major things. Now, when we start talking about the 22, the first thing that always comes up is its lethality, is the fact that it's as lethal as any other round, which it is. In terms of pure lethality, a 22 is as capable of killing as any other round. But see, where that starts to fall apart is how quick that death occurs. That is, if you shoot somebody with a 22 or something with a 22, how quickly will it die? Or how many shots are you going to need to get them to die quickly? Because the goal obviously would to be, to stop them as fast as possible. It doesn't do you any good if a 22 caliber round sits in him and kills him, be it a beast or man, for 24 hours, giving them time to either, reprise their attack against you or find somewhere else to die so that you have no benefit from the food. Like if you're killing a wild boar and you put a 22 through it and it doesn't die until Tuesday, until next Tuesday, it got away, you wasted your ammo, and there's a dead hog feeding somebody else somewhere else, right? So that's one of the big problems with the 22 is it is capable of killing, but it doesn't do the job fast enough for what you're trying to do. Oh, well, yeah, a well-placed shot, though. Okay, you're right, a well-placed shot. I've been to the range, dudes. I know that you guys, your idea of a well-placed shot is a 5-inch group at 100 yards. That's not going to cut it. And even if it does, at that distance, you could argue that the 22 is not going to do enough damage with that well-placed shot. It's not going to sink far enough into it, not going to open up a large enough cavity that, again, you're going to get an immediate outcome that you want. So there's a problem with the 22 just in lethality, just in the instantaneous lethality. So it makes more sense to me to hit them with something where, look, when you look at all of these rounds, you can't possibly look at this 22 down here and say, you know what, it is as lethal and works as well as all these other rounds, right? You can't possibly say that. And for you to say that it is equal or close to equal to any of these rounds tells me that you haven't actually shot anything with any of these rounds. So there's no real argument there that it's as good as or better than anything else that you could carry in terms of, you know, effectiveness, in terms of its pure lethality, okay? But there are other things that come into play. Weight is another big argument. Somebody says, well, you know, here's 50 rounds of 22 and it doesn't weigh much, right? I can carry 10,000 rounds of 22 and I could only carry maybe 400 rounds of something else, and that would still be way heavier. You know, my battle vest is pretty heavy with all this 223 on it, and there's nowhere near as much ammo in there as I could carry in a brick of 22. So the 22 makes more sense because it's more portable. Well, there's an argument there, and I do subscribe to that argument to a certain point. But there are places where that argument falls apart. And where that argument falls apart the most is going back to lethality. If you need to put 2 or 3 rounds in somebody, then carrying 3 times as many, but requiring 3 times as many, kind of defeats the purpose, does it not? So if I can do with 1 round of this what it takes 3 or 4 rounds of this to do, then what advantage is there in being able to carry 3 or 4 times as many of these? Does that make sense to you? It doesn't. Now, even if it's 10 times as many of these, it's still, you're carrying a lot of ammo that you won't use. And that brings us into the next topic, and it kind of folds into that one. Well, it's not as loud. It's not as loud, so we can be stealthy about shooting our prey, be it man or beast, with our 22. Well, this is a Colibri, and I guess I'll take a second to the side here and actually talk about the Colibri and its effectiveness and what it's good for. If you're eating squirrels and rats and you want to be super silent, the regular speed Colibri, this is a super Colibri. The powderless Colibri, out of this 22 rifle up here above me with its 24-inch barrel, is about as loud as a stick snapping. It's not something that from 50 feet away you would recognize as a gunshot. In fact, the impact of the round within 30 yards is louder than the actual gunshot. So if your argument is that I can bring Colibris and I can make quick work of killing varmint for the purpose of eating, rabbits, you know, the small animals that you might eat, then okay, look, I've put these, you know, the little ones through the heads of rabbits. It works. It takes a minute. They hop around for a second, but it doesn't take forever. You can chase them down. You can get them. A Colibri will do the job. So if that's your argument, then maybe you do have a good argument for bringing your 22. But if you're talking about standard velocity, anything in the sonic range and above for a 22, which is what you're going to need for anything bigger than a rabbit, no, I don't buy that philosophy, because we're going back to this. In a bug out scenario, are we going to be announcing our presence to society? That is, you know, okay, well, a 223 super loud, people will hear it for a mile away. A 22 is only loud enough that people will only hear it from 150, 200 yards away. So I prefer that. Well, the thing is, you probably, I don't know if you realize this or not, but if you're bugging out, so is everybody else. And you're not going to be alone anywhere. You think you're going to be alone? You're not going to be alone. You're going to be out in the mountains or the woods or wherever with people. You won't know whether they're in range or not, whether they'll hear the shot or not. If you're firing multiple rounds to do the damage that you need to do, they will find you. They'll hear one and go, what was that? And then they'll hear another and go, ooh, I know what that was. Let's go see if he has anything he wants. And it's quiet-ish, so it's probably just a 22. So we're probably going to be able to outreach him and shoot him. You are him if you're carrying the 22. So you need to be able to do, if you must shoot in a bug out situation, you need to be able to do everything you need to do with a single shot, because the second shot leads them to you. And even if it's relatively quiet, it's still loud. And if it's loud enough to be heard and you have to shoot again, then you have invited trouble. So that's another place where I think the 22 is not practical. Again, if you're out in a bug out situation, in reality, if the world is falling apart and you have to do something to save your own life and you go out into the middle of nowhere, you should be trapping. I'm going to do a video on building traps soon, so that you can see how to capture prey without shooting it, so that there's not an invitation to your location, right? Then you should also be creating, your place, building your place in such a way that it funnels out bad people. Create choke points, create traps for people and animals in such a way that if somebody comes up on you, even if it doesn't kill them, they're gonna know not to mess with you, because they're gonna see what they could be walking into in terms of traps and damage and things like that. You need to intimidate people around you, but you need to do it silently. You don't need to shoot everybody who comes around, because they will find you and they will take your stuff. So again, the 22 does not really work in that situation. Now, I know a lot of you are arguing, and you have good arguments. I understand that. But really, if you really think about it, one shot is far more important in that situation, because you should not be shooting anyone ever anyway. If you're in a bug out situation, don't shoot, because again, we just covered that. So I don't need to keep going down that road. So all of this, I think, comes together to suggest that the 22 is really not an ideal arm for a bug out situation as a primary rifle for a capable adult. It's just not. I'm sorry. And I'm known for butt hurting people, especially on my other channel, but it's how it is. It is how it is. So listen, guys, if you're going to bug out, probably think about bringing something that will actually do damage, like a significant damage with the least amount of gunfire necessary, and maybe you'll live longer. It's just my opinion. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate you coming to my channel. It's great. I love you. You guys take care. Peace out.